Make America great again. I see a lot of, or I've seen a lot of like comedy shows where they walk up to a Trump supporter and then they ask him, when was America great? And the Trump, the whole point of it is just because the Trump supporter can't really answer the question. But when I was reading a series of essays that have been collected into a book by a historian named Richard Hofstadter, he talks about the U.S. conquest of the Philippines, and talks about the transition of the United States into an empire, and also inadvertently sort of answers the question that those comedians were asking those Trump supporters. Basically, when was this time period that America was great? Now, it's not that he believes that America was great during that time period, but he does basically describe what it is that they're feeling. And it's all a foreign policy topic. It's not a domestic thing. So basically, the essay talks about a time period from the war against Spain that the U.S. fought in both Cuba and in the Philippines, and eventually gained its colonial conquest, the Philippine Islands, as a time period that or marks the beginning of a time period during which the United States is met with a series of foreign policy problems and or topics, and it's able to solve those problems with very clear objectives being met. And this is true all the way up until about World War II. So every major U.S. foreign policy issue that the U.S. faces during that time period, major war, whatever conflict it is you want to look at, for the most part, the major ones all were met with success by the United States. And then after 1945, if you look at the major foreign policy struggles of the United States, most of them turn into these long, drawn-out struggles that don't have a clear answer as to whether or not they were a success. And that has been interpreted by many as a feeling of decline, that the United States is now less powerful than it was before because all of the problems that it faces, it's unable to solve. But the brilliance of Hofstadter's argument is not that these were actually successes and we're just looking at them as failures. What he suggests is that it's not the United States that has gotten weaker, right? It is objectively more powerful than it has ever been. It's still, depending on how you look at it, the largest economy in the world, still has the largest and most powerful military in the world. It's that the nature of the problems that it faces have changed. That no longer are they problems that can be solved through military might, right? They no longer have even clear objectives, right? With, the question of whether or not we should replace the, governments in countries that are, hostile or are not secular or are, fostering terrorism or sponsoring all sorts of stuff. These things, right, these problems that we're presented with, for example, the Saudi government, right? So the Saudi government commits atrocities. It is a brutal regime in many ways. But the question is, what would replace it if we were to stop supporting the Saudis? Would it be better? Would it be a pro-American government after what we've done? Would it not foster terrorism? Would it disrupt the supply of oil? Right? This is not a question with an easy solution, right? You have all the people on the internet saying, oh, the U.S. is a fraudulent nation, right? They're allied with the Saudis who commit all these human rights violations. But these people, while not being wrong, it is a denial of our values to support that regime, have to question what the alternative is. Many of these countries would not become stable democracies that just elected their own leader if the U.S. stopped supporting their governments. In some cases, we actively hurt ourselves, right? When we, for example, toppled Allende. And that was a democratically elected government. He was socialist, right? He didn't have any, there was no sign that he was going to become tyrannical or hurt his people. He just was socialist, and we had to combat the communist threat, quote unquote. That was a clear mistake. But with the case of the Saudis, at this point, right, if you just look about what's going to happen going forward, how do you solve this problem? It doesn't have an easy solution. And the same was true once we got invested in Vietnam. If you don't want Vietnam to fall to communism, what's the solution? There isn't one, at least not a military one, speaking one, right? You have to change what you're willing to accept, essentially. The same is true with, getting rid of the Taliban in Afghanistan. There isn't a true, legitimate military solution to that. We've discovered this. We should have known before time, but we've certainly confirmed it now. So, Hofstadter, writing 50 years ago, basically explained the sentiment of Make America Great Again. These people are talking about the period in which most of the U.S.'s foreign policy goals were met with success, from about the early 1900s, late 1800s to World War II. Just their interpretation of the events are wrong. They believe that we've grown weaker when instead the nature of the problems that we face has changed. And now I get to enjoy a nice ride. So have a wonderful day, guys.